And usually what we do is we check our shoulders. Just check if you're holding any tension in your shoulders. You can just roll that out. Nice big shoulder rolls, just to work any tension out. And feel as though you have a string attached to the top of your head, just sort of stretching your spine out, stretching you up. And your chin slightly tilted toward the chest, just slightly. If we're looking up too high, then our mind tends to become more distracted. Too low toward the chest, we might get a bit sleepy. So it's just a slight tilt of the chin toward the chest. Your eyes not squeezed tight and not wide open, just letting in a little bit of light. So you can just sort of gaze at the floor about, a couple of feet in front of you. Just letting a little light in, not focusing on it. And our hands, feet on the floor, or cross-legged, hands in our lap or on our knees. Have our left hand on our lap, palm up, right hand on top, palm up, and the thumbs gently touching. And just notice any tension. Again, check your shoulders, check your spine. And notice if your lips are tight, if your mouth is tight, just relax it. Just notice and let it go. Be a slight little smile. When I ring the gong, we're just going to focus. You can focus on the sound of the gong. But I want you more to focus on the breath entering through the nose, coming down, filling the lungs and coming all the way down to your abdomen and very gently out again through the nose. Sometimes we might feel a little bit more sort of letting go of some tension and we want to just release it through the mouth, and that's fine. But as we get regulated and our breath gets regulated, we get more relaxed, then we come up and out through our nose again. Focusing on the breath, entering and leaving your nose, your mouth. Just notice if your mind is wandering from the breath and gently bring your mind back to the breath. So let's take a moment to reflect on why. Why are you here? So we go back to this morning when you were getting ready to come here. What were the causes? What were the conditions that created that wish and that ability to come? Now go back to yesterday, maybe last night, when you may be tired and thinking about what am I doing tomorrow? What were the conditions that created that experience of I'm tired? What will I do tomorrow? Go back further. Let's go back to maybe a month ago. Think of a time a month ago, around about that. What were the conditions that created that experience? And if you're telling someone about that experience, you might use those words, I was, or I did, or I felt. What is it that created that I experience? Go back to a time comes to mind when you were a child, an experience you had when you were a child. What comes to mind? And what created that I experience? I was, I am. What created that experience? go back to your earliest memory and then reflect on even your birth. What created that experience? What were the conditions that created that experience? I am. Bring your mind back to this present moment. What is it that brought you to this present moment? And this I experience now. I am. Mm. So, is there any time at any time that you came upon that you existed entirely separate from anything else, from your environment, from those in your environment, completely independent? What do you think? What did you find? Hmm. And at the same time, that experience you were having was dependent upon previous moments in time. Perhaps the environment that you were raised in, the situation you were there at exactly that time that allowed that experience to manifest. We all have our journey through life, right? We're born alone, we die alone, but are we really alone? We always have people around us. We have all the conditions that come together for us even to be conceived, to be born, right? To be nurtured in some kind of environment. So we actually, if we would try to separate ourselves from this world, right? This vastly, intricately interconnected world, we cannot separate ourselves from that world. Our experiences in our mind and our thoughts that arise and fall or rise and lead to another thought, do they ever stop? Our thoughts are like a stream, right? They're like a stream. And one thought leads to the next and to the next and to the next, right? And our environment, what brought you here today? What were some of the things in the interconnected nature of all things? How did we get here today? Where did that come from? So it's always helpful. Go back to the why. Can our body do anything without? Can it take action without a thought? Remember we did that? Want somebody to stand up here. Stand up if you, without your mind telling you to stand. Can you? I can tell you, but if your mind doesn't say yes, and I told a little story that I forgot to tell you actually the exact point of that story last week when there were two boys running, in a direction. This was, so I work with children, so running toward, I think they were going to the water fountain or something, and I called out to them, stop. One stopped and one didn't. And I asked them, well, why did you stop? And you didn't. The one who stopped said, well, my mind told me to stop. So it's not the words I say or the words anybody says. It's what you do with that, right? It's what's your decision, and what happens comes from your thought. Nowhere else. It comes from your thought. But a lot of the time, right, our thoughts. Remember we talked about, also we mentioned about supposedly 47% of the time our mind is wandering. It's not focused, right? We talked about this. And research shows from Richie Davidson, research that from his Healthy Mind Institute, that when our mind is wandering, it's not happy. What do you think about that? Remember I said, what do you think? What do you think? Disagree? Okay. What did you find? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Take a break. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Does it depend where your mind goes to when it wants to take a break? Yeah. So a lot of the time we kind of will our mind will cycle around and around if we're concerned about something. We have stress in our body, in our mind, and it will go over and over the same thing, trying to figure something out. And it's not such a bad thing if we have a focus on that. Is our mind wandering? If we're focused on one thing, but we're looking for a positive outcome, right? It's very easy to get stuck on thinking about things that are triggering, remember, our fight, flight, or freeze, that amygdala, that part of the brain that's like preserve and protect, right? Remember, we talked about it last week. We're always trying to protect our ego. What is the ego? What is it? It's our sense of self, right? I am. I am. And we've talked about where that I am, that sense of self, that story about ourselves, where does that come from? Hmm? Childhood? What about childhood? What kinds of things? Hmm. Hmm? Mm-hmm. And does that still happen now, though the brain is formed? And does the brain ever stop forming? And hey, we can be our own therapist too. Yeah. And we can, when we understand, who is the I? I am. I am Pam, and I can tell my whole story. It's a story. We create our stories of who we are, and they are influenced by our environment, especially when we're young. They're influenced by as we're growing up and as the people we meet, who we meet, right, through our lives, how they tell us in many different ways, right? Even without words, we talked about how research shows that holding a view of somebody affects the way they see themselves. If we, it's shown with teachers, for instance, and you have children in your class, and that teacher's holding a view of each one of those children. And maybe she has or he has a particularly challenging child. And so their view, might trigger some of their buttons, maybe from their own childhood, growing up, when they were in school, or maybe their partners, their friends. And so that gets triggered. And what do we do as humans? What do we do? We're really good at blaming others. Anytime we feel uncomfortable, even driving, on the freeway, we're en route to somewhere and we've got this appointment we've got to get to, and someone's driving slow in the fast lane. So we blame that person. You might be driving the right speed, by the way, not really slow, but we're in a hurry. So we try to change the world, right, to suit us. And if it doesn't go the way we want it, it isn't the way we want it, then it triggers stress, anger, frustration, right? Sadness. All those emotions get triggered because we're trying to change the situation to suit ourselves. In actuality, we can't necessarily do that. I often tell this story, about we used to go with our family to Hawaii for holidays, where my father-in-law came from or grew up there. And and we'd go to this beautiful island, Kauai. Beautiful, lush and green and gorgeous. Well, it is because it rains a lot. So you'd get there and it would rain every day. Like, oh, I was coming to this beautiful island to relax and enjoy, but look, it's raining. So you can't guarantee what is going to happen that day. Happenings, remember? What happens to us, what seems to happen to us, what we happen upon, what we try to make happen. So we can try to change the situation, or what we miss happens. Things don't always work out the way we want them to, right? And would you agree? No matter how hard we try, sometimes it doesn't necessarily work out that way. Or we might be with somebody like a partner or a friend, and we think, oh, I really want to help that person change to be the person I want them to be. I mean, we really work at that because we're always looking outside ourselves. I mean, a lot of the time. And when we're looking inside ourselves, sometimes we can get in those loops, hamster wheel, loops, the hoops, and we don't get anywhere, right? But what we know is that even just through that inside, right, inside our own mind, beneath all those stories that we tell ourselves all those things that have become habitual. So what research shows us is that we are habitual beings, that we create habit, that we've created these habits going back through our childhood, right? Things we've been told, things how we should be, all the shoulds, right? So those have created stories about ourselves and habits, repetition of behaviors and thoughts and behaviors. Remember, we can't do anything. Our body responds to our thought, right? The intention. And so we've created these, and it's all just really a story. It's an interpretation about ourselves in the world with others, right? We're full of it. We're full of those stories. And we're driven by habit. And that habit, those habits we've instilled in ourselves through repetition, control us in a sense in what we do with our life and each day. But it's thought. It's all thought. Remember we talked last week about how we come in contact with the object through our senses, right? And in just a small percent of a second, 140th of a second, and maybe it's even less, our mind responds and very quickly labels good, bad, or indifferent. Labels. And those labels are not necessarily the same for everybody, right? What happens then is that, and why are the labels different? Why might our labels be different? Why? Perception. And what's that based on? Where does that perception of the story come from? Your story, your view. And it doesn't, even by that time, does it exist? Mm-hmm. 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 Absolutely. 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 Change your mind, change your life, change your world. We're creating our worlds. We've created who we are through the stories we repeat to ourselves. We are creating and we continue to create. But the good news is, so remember the old story, the old line like, oh, well, this is just how I am. I can't change. You have to accept me how I am. That's not true. You can tell yourself, hey, come on, who are you kidding? I talk to myself like that too. I laugh at myself. Oh gosh, there you go again, Pam. You know, this mind of ours is so extraordinary. It creates our world. And the good news is, didn't get to that before, did I? The good news is that we can change it. Change it. Change. And we know now that the brain itself continues to change. And that actually, even just visualizing something is changing the brain almost as though you did that. So, like sports coaches, they use visualization, and they practice, they visualize going through, that move, that strategy over and over. And it changes the brain and prepares the brain so that it's very quick. It knows how to, operate. I mean, it's the same with anything we do, right? We learn how to do things, it becomes more natural, more habitual. We just do it. We don't really have to think about it. So we've done that about our lives throughout our whole life. And we sometimes become sort of disconnected. We get into our own world, and sometimes it's hard to get outside those stories that connect us with others in a positive way, in a helpful way, in a helpful way. Because we get stuck in the stories. And they often are not that helpful. Why are they not so helpful? Because what we talked about is we're protecting that ego. And what happens is, you know, as I said, that amygdala, fight, flight, or freeze. And we're so afraid of being criticized, not appreciated, not getting what we want, losing what we have. All these things are fear based. And these are the things, you know, it all comes from the mind. And yet, underneath, I mean, the real true nature of the mind is what we tap into a little bit when we meditate, when we focus, just even focusing on the breath. We calm that that constant chatter in our mind, those stories, right? And we go deeper. We go beneath those stories. And we go to that place that's so clean, clear. That's sort of the nature of bliss, peace. We all have that. That's that true nature of mind. Yes. Oh dear. Hands up who wants a downer comment. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Absolutely. Absolutely. The mind, okay, the brain, we talk about the brain here, we talk about the mind center here. It's like connected with the feelings more than just a computer, right? This is like the computer. And this is like the information we have this, but we feel we connect with things deeper. But everything that we do, absolutely everything we think, remember, can you find anything that's not connected to everything else? We examine it when we went our journey back to our birth just before. We never completely, we're never isolated. We can't be. We feel like we are. Our experiences are our experiences that we're creating or connecting with, like your experience that you had, you know, when you were a child. You know, those experiences are coming together. It's causes and conditions coming together in your mind. But your mind, even just thinking something, right, changes the brain. But so our thought changes, our experience changes our bodies. Chemicals are released through experiences, right? Cortisol, stress, serotonin, feel good, oxytocin, bonding, dopamine, really feeling good. So those chemicals are affecting our body. They go all through our body. What is the source? It comes from those chemicals are released. They come from thought, thought, thought. Change, change our story, change our mind, change our body, change our energy. That's it. But yes, we hold so much in our bodies. We change our bodies through our thought. So and yet our thought just so bogged down with old stories. You see what I mean? So the downer part of it is actually, yeah, we've got to go back to the mind. We've got to work on our minds, and our bodies will respond. Our bodies will respond. Because if we're still thinking those thoughts, if we still have those thoughts dominating in our mind, then our body is not going to respond in a positive way, right? You start to change that. And you'll start to feel, you may change your habits. You might find, do yoga or whatever it is that brings you into your body, mind connected to the body, and start to change, the energies and the way they move in your body and the chemicals that are released in your body, right? See? So it will change that way. But the body doesn't change the mind. It can if we feel like. We feel like. Yes, it's interconnected. It's all connected. You are, yes. That's right. But you're getting high. But then again, will that high last? You have to always run to get that high. So it's like we can get that high. We can get all of those good chemicals if we go to our bliss place, which is in our own mind. But it's not in the stories. It's not in the busy. It's in deeper than that. But it's there. We have it with us all the time. And so practicing, even just practicing, a little mindfulness, just breath awareness. Maybe in the morning we talked about and set your intention, train your mind. We're training our mind. What is it that you want to do? What do you want to focus on today? As far as the qualities you want to bring into your life that day that you're working on. What do we want to create more of in our life? And you take a moment, it could be 3 minutes, 30 minutes, however long, and you sit and you focus. And as you get to a more calm place and feel good, and from there, you can go wherever you want. But remember, thought creates action, leads to action. Thought comes from mind. So train your mind. Tell yourself what you want to focus on that day. You can write it down. You can have like a peace corner, right? We talked about that, a peace place. Set up something like a little altar, something like that. And then you remember, right? And then you can set it on your timer. Remember, we talked about that? You can set a little timer on your watch or on your computer. Every time it dings or gongs or whatever sound you want to put on there, then you have take a moment. Let's go back to the breath. And remember your intention. You're training your mind. You're changing your story. When you notice a negative, story come up in your mind, just notice it. Hey, I'm not going to follow that. And then you change your mind. You go back to what is your real quality inside. Go back to that. That's sort of the real you. That's your true nature. Your true nature is compassion, peace, So what we know now from research and from neuroscience and from ancient wisdom is that our true nature is compassion. It is this sort of enlightened quality, if you like. But unless we nurture it and connect back into it, and the older we get, the more stories we've got going because we've been here longer, telling ourselves this story, reinforcing it, right? Creating our happiness and creating our sadness. And it takes work to change it. True, it takes work to change it. Practice. But tell yourself throughout the day, Catch yourself. Call yourself by name. Oh, come on. Pam. There you go again. You know, I do that all the time. And I just laugh at myself. Oh, yeah. Might sound a little weird, like I'm going a little crazy because who's this woman talking to herself? Anyway, um, so I thought we would, just to become aware of when we come in contact with an object, what gets triggered in our mind. So I thought we'd take a moment to just take a little walk, a mindful walk. Don't go too far. And pause wherever you are. If you can sit down, you can sit down and go to your breath, just recenter and just notice. Or if you're walking, notice your senses, how they connect with the environment. It might be people, might be the trees, whatever it is. What draws your attention? What pulls on your connection, on your perception, on your attention? That's the word. What is it? Okay, that takes your attention. And just notice then what thought arises, what's triggered in your mind, and what emotion is triggered from that. Just notice, that's all. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're going to do that. Just going to do it and see if you notice that, because we're doing that all the time. And we're responding and reacting and creating with our mind. That's what we do. So we're not going to go too far away, and I'll ring the gong when it's time to come back. We'll go for like maybe 10 minutes by the time we get back here. When I ring the gong, come back here. I was going to give you a T and P break, but we'll come back here first, okay? So sitting comfortably, we got to go back to our center where we will move out from. So again, back to your breath. Notice one breath follows the other. It's a continuum. And each breath goes through our whole body and oxygenates our body, the cells in our body, the atoms. If we notice the mind wandering, gently bring it back to the breath. The mind is like a crystal clear pool of water. See it like that, still, not moving. The center of our heart chakra, if you like, at our heart level, center of our body. Just reflects. It just reflects. And thoughts are like fish that swim through that pond. We don't follow those thoughts. We let them go. We notice them, but we let them go. Now, have your thought give you the message to stand and notice all those interconnected parts that enable you to stand, to walk. And you're going to move out into the environment. Find a place, if you wish, to sit where it feels good, or walk. And we're going to go in silence and try to stay more in that reflective place in your own mind. Don't follow the thoughts, but notice. Notice what is reflected in your mind, what thought comes to your mind. When you experience the environment through your senses. So when I ring the gong, we go. Okay. So, anyone want to share? What did you notice? Did anybody notice what you noticed? A choice. Uh-huh. You had a choice of how you interpreted what you were experiencing. Yes. Uh, uh-huh. 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 That's the right way to be. Mhm. Mm. Interesting. Did anybody else notice that they started to label and story? And that mhm, comes from the mind. Mm. Anybody else notice? Mm-hmm. So connected you back to your mother's garden. Interesting. Anybody else? Uh-huh. To find the peace, the stillness. Interesting. Good observation. Interesting. Did we all have the same experience? Some of you were triggered back to memories of mother's garden, where you grew up. We all kind of triggered something different in our mind, different thoughts to arise. When you heard the dog leash, that point, your mind went to that. Your senses follow those different phenomena, whether it's our ears, our eyes, what we see, what we smell, what we touch. But it triggers something immediately in our mind. Thought, touching back. And that's how we are all day long. We're triggered by who we see, but we connect to stories we have. We're triggered by what we hear. Again, connected. For instance, music is very powerful. Music takes you back to when you were a teenager a lot of the time. Those are pretty impactful experiences we have as young people, forming our identity, who we are, what we believe. So that's how we go through life. Oh, here she is. Did you do a quick round of the meadow? Great. We were just talking about what maybe you can share, put you on the spot. What did you notice about your mind and labeling? Discoveries, yeah. Yeah. So there we all were, same environment, and none of our experiences were the same. And that's based on different things that are triggered in our mind. And that's fine, that's how we are. But to be aware that we are always filtering, responding to our environment. And so it's so important for us to find our inner place that is proven to reduce illness, our health improves, um, longevity, less stress, easier to retain things, to learn things, new things. It affects our whole body. Our mind affects our whole body. And going to that peaceful place, just training and retraining our mind. And remembering, continuing to tell ourselves to change our stories, the things we don't want to be tied to anymore. We don't have to be tied to them because constantly changing. Okay, at this moment, I'm going to give you a little T&P break, but please bring your tea back here because we don't have very long to go now. Okay, thank you. So, yes. And that leads us into, we're going to touch a little bit on emotion. But we do know that, and we've already covered that in essence, emotion. If we apply what we've learned so far, the mind and the way the mind creates story and the way we interact with the world around us, right? 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 And are led by the mind, by thought that leads us to even be here today, that led our three new people to leave and go to the bookstore. Was thought. Yeah, thought. So thought creates, triggers emotion. And just like we all experience different things, and we tap back to experiences in childhood or, you know, growing up, right? Different things that we connected with when we were having that experience, that simple experience outside, just noticing, connects back to memory. It draws from memory, it triggers, and that triggers emotion. You see? Simple. If we can pause on the emotional response and question it, check up, like my teacher, Lama Yesh, used to say, check up, dear. Don't just accept, don't just go with it. Check up. And I remember I mentioned Ted Lasso, who also quotes with quite some wisdom. Who's watched that? Yeah, it's so fantastic. But anyway, um, be curious, not judgmental. Be curious. Check out, where did that come from, Pam? How did that get triggered? Check out, where'd that come from? And we don't have to let those habitual ways of being and reacting run our lives, right? We can start to make a choice of how we react to things. We can. It takes practice. Is emotion, and with every thought, really, emotion is triggered on some level, some degree or other, it can it runs our lives. Which direction we're going to go. We're going to go where the people are. We're going to go to a quiet place. I mean, that's life. There's nothing terrible about that. It's what we do, right? But to be aware of emotion that gets triggered, and can we be in a place, say, with a lot of people and become aware of our mind and not be triggered? Oh, look at that person. They just are not judgmental. That person, oh God, they've got so many piercings all over their face or tattoos, they're all tatted up, you know. Judgment, click back to a previous experience when you maybe had a difficult, frightening experience. Again, they make it like, bam, you're going to react or respond and judge in a certain way, right? That's how we do it. But to start to check up, reserve, no, we are projecting, right? We're creating a story immediately, instantly, right? And it seems like that's the way it exists. Check out. Does it really? We're forming opinions, we're being triggered, and the emotions arise, and it colors our experience. So experience comes from the mind and from previous experience. And the emotions that arise and that are triggered, do they last? Are they permanent? Look at change. Okay, why did something get triggered? In essence, we were looking for happiness in that moment. We always are, right? Some kind of happiness, feel good. Triggered, we didn't hear what we wanted to hear. We interpreted it a certain way. So interpretation triggers a certain emotional reaction. Emotion arises, right? We're like these little machines. Emotion arises, triggered. Very often, we'll become more aware of our negative emotion because of fear, protecting ourselves, protecting our egos, right? Protecting ourselves, right? And then we keep going with that. We can build on that. We can. Perseverating, like, or what is it called? Just going around and around about it, right? building on it. And soon we have some created something that doesn't really exist. We just created it, fueled by our emotion, by previous experience. We've created a whole story. Amazing. Doesn't exist. None necessarily exists like that at all, nor do we exist the way we tell ourselves. It's all story. And so, different emotions that arise, if we start to become aware, and instead of just giving power to the emotion, right? And those old ways of seeing, triggered by those old ways of seeing, the habitual ways of seeing, take a break, take space, then breathe that energy out, breathe that negativity out, and keep breathing, just following the breath until you get back to that, closer to that innate clarity of mind, still, clear, just reflecting, not interacting. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Remind yourself. Talk to yourself. Absolutely. Remind yourself. Talk to yourself. And there are different tools you can use. You know, we created these different tools for working with kids and families, but we use for conflict resolution. So we know with when you're in when if you're having a conflict with somebody, what is it usually because of? We I created conflict resolution, but it's very simple, and it's on the back of this card. It's integrated with the 5 R's of how we learn from mistakes, right? Which is really sort of thinking about things and mapping it back and saying, the 5 R's are these, but there's tools you can use. 5 R's. Remember that acting in a harmful way, following our strong projections of triggered from previous experience doesn't create happiness for yourself nor for others, because normally we act on it, we speak about it in a negative way. Feeling sorry when you notice it, regretting, I went down that track again. I just got led there. My mind led me there, my old habits. Remedy, applying the remedy. Come on, we're learners. This is a learning. This is how we learn. We watch our mind. We notice things about ourselves that we want to change, right? Remedy. You know, maybe it's that you said something to somebody, you reacted, and you can say, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I'm still working on that, and I'm sorry you know, shouted at you or whatever it is that you did." That might be a remedy there. Very hard, I've noticed, for adults to apologize. So we're teaching young children to learn to apologize. They love it and they learn about it because it's very liberating, actually. Resolution is sort of your strong promise. New Year's resolutions, how they usually go. But that's as we go along with the things we notice, we can make a resolution, like a strong commitment. Quite strong commitment. I'm going to try next time, better next time. Maybe, I'll set that in my intention tomorrow or whatever, or tonight or right now. And rejoice. Always rejoice. We're learners. Yay, I learned. I faced the tough stuff, tough stuff. And then the conflict resolution is remembering, you stop, don't engage in the emotional time. Take some time to breathe, get back to your center, arrange to meet, to discuss it, and then listen deeply and speak kindly. So that's really where we use the shell and crystal. We think, what can we use for that? But the crystal really represents that this, innate quality within us at our heart level. And it's got all the colors. And the colors we use are, you'll see the flags around here, right? They're usually 5 colors. I used to just use 5 colors, but these are positive qualities that we focus on, and color is everywhere. So we can use color to help remind us. We need to remember. And it's hard because we've got our old habits, right? But the crystal is like we reminder that everybody has this same quality inside. We all want these same, helpful qualities. We all want that in our lives, right? I added 2 more. These are the 5 colors, the 5 dhyani, the 5 Buddhas that you see, the 5 colors, and they represent different qualities. And on different levels, they represent different things. And then I added forgiveness and courage because in order to transform the harmful opposites of those, you really need to be able to forgive. And that takes courage. And underlying all the harmful actions, all the harmful emotions, is fear. It's fear. It's fear. And that's why, on a science level, it's the amygdala: fight, flight, or freeze, protect ourselves, protect our ego. And that's what gives rise to all the harmful actions. These are just, 7 of them, but they're very key 7. And listening. We know by listening that we are listening, that we need to listen. Everybody's got their story. If we're in conflict with somebody, both people have a story, right? Right? That's where conflict comes from, right? Our projections, we're creating it, right? So remember, everybody has this same quality. And when you shine wisdom through it, or compassion, all the colors of the rainbow, all the colors of the positive qualities are in there. All beings have it. All beings. And as we get back to this space in ourselves and we start to see that and remember the namaste quality, everybody has those qualities, right? We all have the same wish, in essence, to be happy. And to think and reflect and connect more deeply namaste quality with others, right? Right. So remember that. So when you're the speaker, you speak with that, try to tune in that level of respect. They have this quality in me. They want to be just like me. A shell is when you pick up a shell, similar. What do you do with it? Listen. And if you put it to your ear and you're talking and then you're looking around and can you hear the ocean? And this reminds you. And this is actually called a harp shell. And I really liked this for this activity because it's sort of got all these ripples, like sound travels. It's like just ripples. And that's a great way to deconstruct anger. So you'd say, he made me angry. He did? How did he make you angry? Well, he said, blah, blah, blah. I said, oh, so the words made you angry. How did they get you feel angry? How did they get from that person's words into you? Well, you deconstruct sound waves, the words, sound waves, interconnection. Comes here, hits your ear. How does it get into anger? Is anger solid? There's something, doctor, open it up and pull it out. Is it solid? What color is it? Deconstruct. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. He didn't make you angry. You made your anger. We, ourselves, interconnected, we're reacting all the time, right, to our environment. We didn't like the way what we heard. We didn't like the words we heard, right? Take our power back and not give it to our power, to those old habits and habitual ways of reacting. And so in working and retraining my mind and now training children's minds, there's a way that people talk about emotion or with children and say, you need to speak up for yourself and say, be able to tell that person, you made me angry, or mm, you made me do it. The old story. We blame because we blame others, but we have a choice. We can choose how we react. I mean, if we remember that we can have that power. So you can say, rather, okay, I felt sad when um, you turned me down when I invited you over for dinner. I felt disappointed and then felt sad. The other person can say, listen, deep listening, not looking around and like kind of not really listening, paying attention, can say, repeat what you said. So this is this conflict resolution, right? Because, not accepting an invitation could lead to a whole big long story. End of friendship, right? I mean, seriously. So, listen deeply. So that would be not as though this isn't listening deeply for the sound of the ocean. So listen deeply. Ah, okay. Oh, so you felt sad and disappointed when I didn't accept your invitation. Yes, switch. Because the other person has a story. Well, I didn't accept your invitation at that time because, and they say, right? And the other person repeats. And then you get back to, I see now. I see your perspective. And they see your perspective, you know. And is there anything then that we would like to do to apply a remedy? Might be, apologizing. And then, I'm sorry, next time I'll be a little more sensitive and ask more questions or whatever it might be, right? And the other person says how they, it's sort of like an apology, right? I'm sorry, I see your perspective now. And we learn from each other. And then resolution. So your resolution might be next time I'm going to try to remember to do that. I'm going to be practicing that and remembering because that's a helpful thing that I learned today. And then you rejoice. You rejoice. Yay. So anyway, that's the shell and crystal. And even kids, when they learn how to do this, they'll often come up and say, could we do the shell and crystal? And sometimes they need a little bit of help and other times they don't. But if they can learn that that's how it goes and they can learn about learning from mistakes, because everybody makes them. We keep it. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. Good point. Remember when we talked about that? I think it was in the first class, and you asked me that question, and or just you want to teach or you want to be able to help, right? And sometimes you can't, right? Sometimes it's just not there, or they might be saying, "Oh, he really wants to talk to me, but I'm not ready for that." I'm not ready. People are not always ready to hear from somebody else, and so that's maybe that was with those three people who came. They weren't ready to hear all this stuff, right? So that's how it is. It's always going to be like that. So you have the intention, and one day, and it's what is really tricky, actually, and I feel this, I mean, I watch myself, right? Is that we hold on with this to the story of what happened, our story of what happened, right? And our story about the other person. When we see that other person, watch what happens. Does that projection and that story come fill your body? Fill your body, and then they'll feel that. They will feel that. You'll feel it. Maybe you're not aware of it, but you've got that happening. You've got an energy. And that will affect them and their openness to listen to you as well. Because very often we want that person to understand from our perspective. And rather that the powerful thing is to be able to say, so hard. I mean, it is so hard if we feel misunderstood, you know? That's why forgiveness is really hard. Because when you feel like you have to apologize and forgive, it's like, oh, okay, well, you know, it's like somehow not getting our justice met. You know, we're not, we want to make sure that, and that's why this conflict resolution is so good, so helpful, because both people get to tell their story. And each person has a story. Nobody's really in the wrong because they've been led by their mind, by their thought, by where they're at in that moment. You know, we I think I told you this story at one point where even with kids and they were talking about well, not everybody's good. And oh no, it was about being happy. Not everybody wants to be happy. You remember that story? And it was after 9/11, soon after. And one kid says, well, you know, not everybody wants to be happy. Oh, really? Is that right? And when I was doing a parenting class, a parent said to me that about not everybody wants to be happy, like the homeless people downtown. And it was really, really interesting to me. It was like, really? Why do you say that? Well, if they wanted to, they wouldn't be living like that. So we judge. And this little boy said, well, not the bad guys. The bad guys. Wow. Were those bad guys, were they always bad guys? What were they before they were grown up? You know, they were kids. Kids. What were they before they were kids? They were babies. Hmm. Did you ever meet any bad babies? And then they say, oh, well, maybe it was something that happened to them when they were growing up. Okay. Kids can understand that. Have you ever been a little bit naughty sometimes? Anybody here ever do something that they know they weren't supposed to do? You know? So, mm, 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 definitely. That's good if you're bringing that open energy. But very often, check up. We bring our story with us. We bring the previous experience and the way we related to them. But with our loved ones, and then we really care about that love, that unconditional love can dominate. It can break through. And we see how it's, you know, besides the behavior that they're exhibiting, we still have that unconditional love. So I would say to my children, yes, sometimes I get upset with things that you do. I get frustrated or, you know, upset. But I said, I still love you all that time. I still have that unconditional love. And so that opens that relationship. Yeah. And they know they can depend on that. Get away with a lot. So you have to have boundaries. But that's another, and discuss and talk about it. So you talk about it, but you're coming from a place that's more open and wanting to hear what the other person's experience is. And people are not always ready for that. And it's a way, they're holding it so tight and they feel so threatened by it. Whereas with your son, you had more hope of that, but they're also going through their struggles and their changes. It's hard. So for you to hold that unconditional love, to always keep that open heart, but also sort of help to hold them with have conversations about, certain things will lead to. These are boundaries I want to put in place because, what's your thought about that? You know, but for them to understand where you're coming from and to try to provide that. I used to say, people ask me about their teenage kids, and I would say, well, remember what you did when they were 4 years old? And that's an age where they really, are trying to break out of, I know everything, and they sort of, I'm independent and I can decide for myself. And it's sort of a power surge they go through. But anyway, could talk more about this, but keeping open hearted. So anyway, so there's tools that you can use, and those 7 colors you could even, if you wanted. We also have something I created, which is we need that little dopamine fix, right? It helps us to retrain. So I put together, which you can do, your own, but I found these little jars, heart. I call them heart jewels, because then I put together all these little bags of jewels. They're just glass, but then you can reflect at the end of the day or throughout the day. It doesn't have to be one of these, but just if you want to use the color method, that's helpful. And you say, wow, it was hard, but I really was able to rejoice, to celebrate and rejoice for that other person's achievements. Even though I didn't achieve it, I achieved the ability to rejoice for them or something. Put a green jewel in the jar, and the jar fills up. And so with each of those little jewels that you put in, and these were developed mostly for children, but also their parents, so that they're tools, they're just reminders, right, in your home. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. But if you want to use the color, it's a great way. So I've got all these little purses in the 7 colors with the 7 jewels and the heart jewels. And when you finish and fill up, there's little booklets that describe how you use it. Oh, there's all I knew there was somewhere. Anyways, heart jewels. Also, heart jewels. It's just a little booklet how you can use the heart jewels. And then you can use, when it's a full jar, you can use those heart jewels to maybe think about, okay, how am I going to share all those qualities that I've strengthened myself with others, right? And maybe you'll do some kind of compassionate action project to give back to others as you've been nurturing all the goodness in your own heart, in your own mind. The mandala, right, for intention. These are just tools. You can create your own tools. Power beads. These I created with little crystal beads that have all the 7 qualities. And it's just a mala, power beads. And when mala means, the beads that people wear. You can have 21 beads that they'll often wear on their wrist, or they'll have a long one with 108 beads. And what the idea is that as you move each bead, you can either say a mantra that helps to retrain the mind, right? Or you could do it with these. What I did with these colored beads is you just breathe in. Maybe you've got you're struggling with something, so you sort of breathe in the opposite quality, like breathe in patience that counteracts anger. Breathe in, think that you fill up with patience with each breath, and you breathe out any anger. Breathe in patience. Move a bead. Breathe out anger. Breathe in patience. You can use it like that. Or if there's a mantra, it's a very powerful mantra. It's the compassion mantra. of Chen Rizig, and you often see Chen Rizig, who is different manifestations of Chen Rizig, but often white in color, usually white in color, and has 4 arms. And then you see the Chen Rizig over here, the gold Chen Rizig there with 1,000 arms and a number of heads. And that's just, wanting to have, in essence, all the power and all the skills to be able to benefit others. But a very simple mantra is Om Mani Padme Hum. Have you heard it? Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. It's very easy, but it's basically may all beings be happy and free of suffering. Om Mani Padme Hum. So you could make your own malas, as they call them Tibetan or Tibetan tradition, or you could use you could purchase some that are in the bookshop. It's right here in handy, and you could use those. These little booklets. Yeah, I make those. These are available, yeah, to purchase. I didn't bring any with me, but you can. And I've got a shop on creatingcompassionatecultures.org. So we're a nonprofit, so it's .org. So, yeah, so those emotions, you can have tools to help you. And I think what we'll do is we'll take just a few minutes to jot down, in reflection on the emotions, to jot down what are 5 emotions that you would like to really start to transform, to train your mind, to catch yourself. Maybe just 5 emotions that tend to be regular visitors to you, that you feel get in the way, that you would like to transform. Okay? And in reflection, I'm going to read something here in reflection, okay? We do not become angry with the stick that hits us, with the words that others might say, but with the one who wields the stick. But the one who wields the stick is impelled by hatred. So what we should truly hate is hatred itself. Shantideva. So that person who says those words or who does those harmful actions, they are impelled by their suffering. Their suffering causes them to do that. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. So, how to not become angry or want to get revenge on somebody who has done something that caused your mind, or was a cause, a condition, and a cause. Because remember, who creates the anger in your mind? If somebody says something or does something you don't like? Yeah. Yeah. And have compassion. If you see that, rather than seeing them as an enemy, what could arise is compassion. I'm so sorry. We could develop patience, right? And patience counteracts anger. We could develop empathy. It's like to act like that because the emotion takes over due to hurt, our hurt in the past. So, 5 things you really feel, and what could help you, could remind you, could help you to overcome those emotions, that habitual way of reacting. And also continue to work on this at home because you're going to take this home with you. Yes, and you can do that actually when you go home because we don't have quite enough time now. But at least write down those emotions that you want and then how you're going to work on them, right? Based on your reflection of what we've covered. How are you going to remind yourself? So it's often very good actually to have the power beads, the mala, on your wrist, a small one, or around if you're wearing it, because it's a reminder. I think the one on the wrist is good. It's a reminder. Okay? Just a reminder. I mean, we need these reminders to change our mind. Remind, retrain our mind. Okay. So the wonderful thing is through understanding how we're all the same in essence, all wanting the same thing in essence. We all have this pure nature of mind. We all want happiness in every moment, and every single being, even the bad guys, want it too. But experiences, conditions, and experiences through life create certain habits, right? And triggers, right? That seem to be beyond our control. They're not if we're made aware that we have these qualities and happiness within ourselves. And we start to see that absolutely everything, right? When we talked about in our second class or third class and continue to, everything's connected. Every single thing, the clothes we're wearing, this building, and our very life has all been dependent on others, on the labors of others, on the kindness of others, the air we breathe, this earth we live on and share. This is it. We're all connected. And what we contribute to this interconnected world we share, right, can create more harm, more sadness, or more happiness. This guy, Dan Siegel, he's an interpersonal neurobiologist. Don't ask me what that is. No. The study of the mind and the interconnection, between others, our environment, and all these things we're talking about, actually, very similar. He created a organization called MindSight. But his research shows, he's a researcher, and his research showed that just listening to another person, deep listening, like listening for the ocean in the shell, actually triggers the same part of the mind, of the brain, as is triggered with empathy. Did have a little activity to do. We don't have time for it. But where you really start to feel that, check up yourself, though. Research yourself. Just listen and practice. I call it the lost art of listening. Everybody's too busy. We've all got this, things going on in our mind now. When we leave here and after we leave this class, then we've got to go da-da-da-da. We've got to do, we're doers on different levels and in different ways, right? Of course, and that's fine. But becoming aware that and giving ourselves time to listen to another person and to really listen to them like you might listen to your son, like you might listen to those loved ones where you're really interested. Listen to others like that. Tap into that namaste quality again. Remember, we can become that person for everybody we meet. But again, we have to train our minds because our minds are so distracted. We've got our story going on and we've got our agenda with our schedule. And so it's very rare. Check up. It's rare. It's rare that people give that kind of attention to each other, especially these days, I think, because we have so much distraction, in our pockets, at our fingertips. Triggers the same part of the brain as empathy. The animals, how to tune into animals, like the horse whisperers and dog whisperers. They're just tuning in to that animal. If you ever have an animal or a pet, can feel the difference. And I'd see that some of these animals that you meet, they're almost human because they've been related to in that way. Tap in. Every being, great and small, wants the same thing as us. In essence, happiness, safety, things. So what we tend to do, though, is through our life is we label people friend, enemy, or stranger based on our relationship with them. Friend, enemy, stranger. But those, if you look at it, it changes around. It's like a cycle. Who's ever had somebody they labeled friend and then they did something that we didn't like, or they said something that we didn't like, and then suddenly they become an enemy of sorts to varying degrees. And then our friends always, at some point, they were strangers. What creates the friend, enemy, stranger label? What creates them? We do. And we can change that. We have a choice. We can always choose if we become aware, right? Become aware. Think about their reality, their experience. And the lost art of listening can really help us right there and see that gratitude, all the food we eat, comes from the hands of many people and animals. But we don't see it that way. If we saw it that way, our whole experience would change. We'd see them all as friends in a sense. Wow, I depend on these people, all these animals. Thank you. Without them, I couldn't have this, delicious meal. But because of this labeling, friend, enemy, stranger, we create a whole world of problems. So we're going to actually watch a little video that I learned something this class. Okay, it had to be repeated again and again to me, but I got it last class. We're going to watch this just on this perception of all that we've learned.